Thanks everybody for coming back. It's the last session of the day, and what a session Tina just had from Tracy from Rapid SOS. I currently still work in the business and we use that, and what a tool for 911 dispatchers. Tracy, if you're still on and listening, thank you very much. I too will be reaching out for further information to continue to educate my staff on that product. What a presentation. Tina, thanks for having me as a speaker, but not only that, an attendee, because I know all of your attendees are definitely receiving some excellent information. And with that being said, I'm hoping that I can close out today strong for those that are still watching and everything else. I'm personally going to be giving away 2 books, and each book will also come with an emailed free license to take what I'm going to talk about today to start moving people towards gold line success. I know it's the last presentation of the day. Sometimes after watching everything for virtual training, it can seem to get a little long, but if you hang with me and find that special spot for a little bit of energy, rather than just looking at this picture and seeing some bats hang upside down, and maybe you've taken that call where they're screaming completely bloody murder, out of control, and you think it's major, and then you find out that it's a bat just hanging around or flying around in their house. Maybe you can relate to that, but rather than looking at the bat as a normal bat, since we're moving closer and closer towards Halloween, if you flip that around, it's the same picture. It's a bunch of bats that are just ready to get down and have a lot of fun. So as I go through the material today, like I said yesterday, I do like to teach in a fun style, but today's topic is a little bit heavier. So bear with me. We're in the last hour for the day and everything else, and let's have a little bit of fun during this last hour. So in order to move towards gold line success, one of the things that I think we need to do, and I think everybody thinks we need to do, is always make sure that we train for and expect the unexpected. So I'm going to share a recent story quickly to set the stage for the rest of the material throughout the presentation of something we recently went through in Iowa. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was called the derecho. And it spanned across the whole state, and the place where it got the worst, up to 140-mile-an-hour winds, was actually in the city that I work in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And what happened was our dispatch center is on top of the Cedar Rapids Police Department on the 3rd floor, surrounded by windows. And this is a little video I filmed when the winds were probably 60 to 80 miles an hour, and they did get up to 140. So take a look at this short video. Whew, the city really getting hammered. There's the barricades blowing all over that were in front of the building. We're extremely busy. I gotta go. I'll give updates later. All right. So I never thought that I would work in Iowa and go through a hurricane. And when I share a little bit about the inland derecho is what it was called, I didn't know the name of it. Somebody called me on my way home and said, you just experienced a derecho. I thought they maybe made up a word. I'd never heard of the word before. It lasted for about 45 minutes. And to put it in perspective, I know sometimes in Tennessee there's tornadoes or there's floods or whatever there might be. Maybe you're more familiar with a tornado. It would be similar to an F3 tornado or a Category 3 hurricane going on with little to no notice to prepare. I remember the tornado siren sounded for straight line winds about 5 minutes before our building started getting hit. As I said, we were located on the floor 3 of the police department. The majority of the city lost power. It spanned across the whole state. It was 700 miles long and about 40 to 50 miles wide. And the interesting thing is we have all these backup procedures in place of if we have to evacuate, where do we go? And we have another agency that uses our CAD and everything else. And we would typically go there for a building fire, but they were also being inundated by this derecho. And so we really couldn't go anywhere. And on top of that, we were surrounded by windows. Luckily, our windows did hold up and everything else. The interesting thing is we had several dispatchers that had their houses not completely destroyed, but some that were very close. Several had holes in their roofs, trees coming through their house, windows broken, cars destroyed, garages knocked down. Cell phone coverage was almost not even existent. And somehow our phones at the 911 center did stay up. We took the most phone calls in the history of our center. We're typically around a 200 to 225 911 calls a day and about 500 non-emergency. We took 2,200 non-emergency and 1,900 emergency calls. So one of the things that I'm starting to look at is, well, one more thing on this slide that I want to cover as well, is we also lost power to the building and then the generator would not start. So we have a battery backup system that lasts for 2 hours. And we got to about 1 hour and 55 minutes. I do think the batteries would have lasted a little bit longer than that, but they finally got the generator started at about 1 hour and 55 minutes. And the phone calls continued throughout the month. It happened in August 10th of this year and continued for several weeks after and being busy. So that story, just kind of think about that and preparing for the unexpected as we move into something I want to call policy by numbers. And typically this is an in-person thing, but we're going to try it virtually. I wanted to make sure I stuck to the presentation I normally give. And when I hit next on the slide, I want you to really own in, come back in. If you're kind of listening, I need you to look at the monitor and the screen. And I'm going to put up some numbers on the screen. Your only challenge is to start in chronological order. And you're going to start with the number 1. And then you're just going to look for the number 2. You can just use your eyes since you don't have a piece of paper in front of you. And then we're going to go for 1 minute. And I want you to see what number you end on. And then I'm going to teach you the policy to the piece of paper and see if we can't get performance to improve. So when I say start, I'll hit next on the slide and you start looking for number 1 and then go to number 2 and see how high you can get in 1 minute. And start. And I'll go ahead and announce, so I'm still talking to distract you, kind of like being in a 911 center, because the phone would be ringing, maybe the printers would be going, and you're already a quarter of the way through. So again, you're trying to get as high as you can with just your eyes, a third of the way through. All right. You're halfway through. Somebody's adding a little more confusion because they're drawing on the thing. That's interesting. That's not me, but that's awesome. You're 2/3 of the way through, 40 seconds in. You got about 15 more seconds to go. So keep doing it with your eyes, hanging tight, seeing how high you can get. 10 more seconds to go. And we're almost done here for the first round. And stop. All right, so that was exactly 1 minute. And maybe you can throw in some chats if you're with me and put your numbers there. I can't see them right now because I'm sharing my screen. It'll throw me off, but just go ahead and put some chats in of what number you made it to, how high you got, because I'll go back and look at these when the presentation is done and afterwards and see if we all improved. Here we go. Here's a few chats coming in. Thanks everybody for chatting it up. An interactive session is always great for the last session. I like it. Keep participating. That's super cool. Thank you, everybody. Now I'm going to teach you the policy of the piece of paper. All right. And if you took the piece of paper and you were to divide it in 4s or quadrants or however you want to look at it, a line down the middle and a line across. And then you'll notice the number 1 is in the top left quadrant as you're looking at your monitor. The number 2 is in the top right quadrant. The number 3 is in the bottom right quadrant, 4 in the bottom left quadrant. And then the number 5 just goes back up to where number 1 is. So you can kind of see it in that quadrant. And what I like to do, even though it's 1 more minute of this, is I like to say that if we, and I'll give some points as to why we do this here in the end. So we'll do it 1 more time and we'll see if you guys can improve and get a little bit higher. So go ahead and start. And we'll do it again for 1 more minute here. And you're going to keep going. And you're 10 seconds in. And again, just using your eyes, seeing how high you can get. You're a quarter of the way done. And again, I'm being the annoying person, just talking and everything else, kind of like that phone ringing. Printer going, coworker asking you a question as you're trying to dispatch a call, or maybe it's a manager or supervisor walking up to you and you got the lights at your consoles that say you're busy, but they ignore them and try talking to you anyhow. And maybe I shouldn't be making you laugh like that, but I'm just trying to distract you a little bit, like working in a 911 center. You got 15 more seconds to go. All right, 10 more seconds. We're almost there for the redo to see if everybody improves. All right, and stop. All right. So hopefully now we're going to comment one more time, keep the interaction going, and just go ahead and say yes or your new number, how much you improved by. I don't care what the comment is, but I know Tina's going to love seeing all the participation as well, and I greatly appreciate it. It makes me make sure I continue to bring the energy throughout the presentation. I'll go back and read all the comments later, and I'm hoping that everybody improved once you understood the policy. Because here's the interesting thing about policy, and this is an example that I do all over, is that when employees are trained on the policies, performance improves. All too often, we are relying on either watch a webinar and taking away the opportunity to ask questions, or we're sending out an email with screenshots and saying this is how you do something, but not following up and making sure there's understanding. And you can see, hopefully all the comments are going to say when I go back and read them all that everybody was able to improve on the policy by the numbers example because I trained you on it after we did it the first time. Hopefully there was comprehension and understanding, because when you truly understand the policy, that's when also adherence to the policy will go up. And then the other thing is we practiced the first time, even though we didn't know it. Okay, we were practicing on the policy, and then hopefully performance goes up. And you have to allow your employees the opportunity to practice. I realize a lot of our stuff is on the job training, live training, and we don't have an opportunity to practice. But during downtime, if you could review a policy with your coworkers, or if you could do something else, it's going to help you when you take that live call. So if you are emergency medical dispatch certified as an example, maybe one person could be the call taker, one person could be the caller, and make sure you're practicing during downtime. I mean, when is the last time you asked yourself, what would I say to somebody if a tornado was blowing through town? What would I say to somebody if the river was rising and we were going to flood? And what would I tell them if they were stuck in a car, how to get out? Or if they were if their accelerator was stuck or whatever it is. And is that fluid and right at the tip of your tongue so that you're ready to go, because seconds truly do matter when you're taking those calls. And hopefully by this short 2-minute example, we did see why it's so important to continue to train on our policies and understand them. And would also, hopefully it was a little bit of entertainment as well for the last session of the day. We can also start talking about 5 ways to move towards gold line success. This was the main learning objective of this course. A lot of times this course I do in 4-hour blocks, and this is a big section of it that's about a 20-minute section that I normally do. And I like to talk about these things to set you up for career success, being an ideal employee and everything else. And then I kind of group them together for this presentation for parts of it. Active listening, effective questioning, self-awareness, presence, and being curious and curiosity. And what does that mean in terms of making you an ideal employee or an effective person for your 911 center? All right. Active listening and effective questioning. We do a great job at that when it comes to listening to calls. And maybe you can review some of those tips and techniques, listening to background noises. Maybe you heard a gunshot go off in the background, or you heard a bottle break, or you heard a window smash, or whatever, somebody screams, whatever it might be. And the one thing I just wanted to touch on briefly on this slide is that making sure we have peer support and everything else available for dispatchers, because dispatching has been around since 1968. And we're starting to find out that there are some PTSD impacts from being a 911 dispatcher and having those calls that stick with you. But I don't want to lose sight of it, because dispatchers also do a phenomenal job on the majority of the calls that they take, regardless of what it is. And a lot of times there's classes that you can train on active shooter events. There's classes you can train on mass casualty incidents, classes for customer service and everything else. But in most of those classes that I've been to, I haven't really found a lot of great examples of where the suspect calls in and reports something. So I came across this example, and I've been trying to share it with everybody as a really great example of effective questioning and active listening by the dispatcher. And we're going to play that here just now, and hopefully the audio is good. There is a couple times, and I did cut out a few slides. It's not the whole call. It is just partial or part of the call. But I'm going to go ahead and play it. There are a few swear words. If you didn't want to hear those, you can go ahead and mute your screen. But what I want you to do as this call is playing is really ask yourself, what questions would you have asked? Maybe what is the dispatcher's customer service? How is she doing? How does it compare to your policy? And this goes back to also preparing for that unexpected thing. And that's how come I think this is a great example. This call happened a few years ago, and the suspect is in custody at this time. But here's the call. He calls in after committing a double murder and talks to the dispatcher.
911, what's the location of your emergency?
18892, Palm Springs. Cancel that. 18892, Indian Springs.
Okay, what's going on there?
I just shot my mother and
You shot your mother?
I committed a double homicide.
Okay, you shot your mom and who?
My nephew.
Okay. What happened?
I lost my mind.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Adrian Graham Wallace.
Okay. Do you know if they are they alive at this point?
I don't think so. I shot him multiple times.
Okay.
I just committed a murder.
Okay. Where are you right now, sir?
My home.
Okay. Okay.
Well, it was my home.
Okay.
It wasn't going to be my home.
What did you shoot them with?
A 308 rifle.
Where is that gun now?
That's on the ground.
Where at?
Murderers do.
Okay. Where did you put it?
On the ground.
Okay, outside or?
It's near the homicide scene.
Okay. Where exactly is that? Is it inside the house or?
Outside.
Okay. In the back of the house or the front of the house?
In the front of the house.
Okay. And are you inside now?
I'm ready to surrender.
Okay.
I don't give a shit about this life anymore. I don't care.
Okay, well, I don't want you to do anything to yourself, okay? I don't want you to kill yourself.
Yeah, I know you want your case.
No, sir, that's not what
Good.
I'm getting at.
Great. Fine. Wonderful.
Okay, are you inside or outside?
I'm smoking a cigarette in the garage.
Okay.
My last cigarette, I suppose.
Are you armed at all now?
I don't really respect your cops at all, but no. If they treat me with respect,
okay,
I'll go ahead and be a prisoner. That's fine.
Okay, so you're not armed with any weapons any longer?
No.
Okay. Okay. Is anybody else there with you?
No.
Okay. Can I ask your date of birth, sir?
I don't remember. It's
Okay.
1971, I think.
Okay. So you said that you went crazy, you had some kind of mental break?
Well, I'm going to open the garage door. I can't believe I did what I did.
All right, and then I cut the call off because the next couple slides, it got into some really graphic language and everything else. But that dispatcher did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. She sounded prepared for the call. She found out about inside, outside, date of birth to be able to run stuff through your NCIC system, whatever your name of it is in your state. She also found out, his where the gun was located, where he was located. If you could hear on one of the last couple slides, you could also hear where phones were ringing in the background. So they were extremely busy during that time as well. And I just think that this is a great example of sometimes when we take murder calls, a lot of times we're talking to victims. We're not always talking to the suspect. And so just being prepared to make sure you know how you're going to talk to the suspect as well for effective questioning and active listening, making sure we're listening to what they say. The other thing is when it comes to weapons on scene, one of the classes I took where an officer and an FBI person was speaking years ago said they want to know if it's a rifle, a shotgun, or a handgun. Rifle is high stopping power, long distance. A shotgun is high stopping power from a shorter distance. And a handgun, they say they want to make sure they can see everybody's hands, easily concealable. And they want to make sure for officer safety reasons that they can see hands during those situations as a reminder. The third and fourth way to really move towards goal line success that I want to focus on today is self-awareness and presence. And one of the biggest things that I encourage people to always change is listen to yourself speak. Are you at work talking about, well, we could do a better job if we had more staff. We could do a better job if our CAD system was better. We could do a better job if we had more training, or whatever it might be. All right, because sometimes that can lead to what's called a fixed mindset, and then you're never going to progress or never change the culture or change the morale at your comm center. There's a book called Mindset as well. I went ahead and I'm reading it right now to help me because 2020 has been challenging, as well as the storm we're going through and everything else, to make sure I stay focused in the growth mindset, where I'm trying to reach out and learn from the mistakes, try to inspire other people, asking them for feedback, and also asking myself, what can I do to make my staff's job a little bit easier and a little bit better? So I'm really trying to focus on that growth mindset. The other thing I did, and if you're still listening and still here with us, this is going to be a part of it for 2 people at the end of this session. I'm going to give away a book to 2 different people, and also a free license to do this. And this is where we start to increase self-awareness. And this is what's going to become available from my company very soon. And it's taking a assessment to find out about your personality and your behavior. And it's a 30-page report that comes back and tells you about the way you communicate in the workplace, what your standard behavior is as a person when you're under stress, and also when working, what other people think of you as well. And it's something that you take. It only takes 12 to 15 minutes, and it determines whether or not you're a D, a dominant type person, or an I, influencing person, or a steady or a compliant type person. The interesting thing about this is that when you take it, I found out that I was an I, heavy influencer, excitable. That's one of the reasons I'm sitting down for these presentations, to make sure that my energy level is not too much. Since it's a virtual training and everything else, I'm usually extremely high energy. But when I read that, and it said exactly what I needed to do to communicate with other people in my 911 center, because I got this report printed out back to me. It said what I should and should not do, and also how to communicate with me. So if you were going to communicate with me, all right, one of the things that it says to do is to allow me to be in a participative environment. I like teamwork as an I. I want to submit details, and you want to submit details to me in writing, but don't necessarily dwell on them. And when I got that information in a report that came back to me, I always go around and I tell the staff, send me an email, send me an email. And I know I annoy some of them by doing it, and I always wondered why. And then I found out it was my personality type that was telling me to do that. And then the communication notes eliminate social time or ignore their ideas. And so if you have a shift that's not getting along or something like that, having them all take this personality test and finding out what they are and how to communicate in the workplace and how to communicate with other styles and everything else will help improve morale, help improve communication at your 911 center, and really start to move the department forward. I know I've used it during the derecho, and I know that the majority of the people fit into the S category, the steady, the stable. And so I've tried to become extremely reliable during this time after the derecho, so my staff knew that they could always reach me, get a hold of me, because the majority of the people are that S personality thing. But this is some excellent information where you can start to learn about yourself and start to grow and become more self-aware about how you communicate and what you can do to improve the culture at your 911 center. It's the most valuable tool I've ever been given, and I just can't encourage people to take it enough. And if you're interested in it, just let me know and I'll try to get you a link. There is a little bit of a cost associated with that. The last step is being curious. And this is one of the most interesting steps because I really want to challenge people to get involved, whether it's technology. Look what Tracy just presented in the last presentation about Rapid SOS. If you could take a person and become an expert in your 911 center about becoming involved and with technology and everything else, and they're the go-to person, or maybe it's one person per shift, are challenging your people and saying, hey, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. What can we learn about as far as technology? So we have somebody to go to besides always relying on IT. Maybe it's something that we can do ourselves in order to make it better. The second thing I put in there is legislation. Be getting involved at the local level as well as the state level and the national level. It's awesome to see all of you participating on the TINA State Conference. There's also national conferences. There's other conferences that are going on that people can register for, whether it's NINA Ignite or other national conferences that you can go out there and get training virtually. And then also I talked about it just a little bit ago, getting people involved in the peer support training in your agency, getting them certified as peer support, mental health awareness examples. One of the calls that we did at our agency was we had a suicide take place by one of our officers, and we decided to get some of our dispatchers also on the peer support team for our law enforcement agency. And what I found out is officers every once in a while are also reaching out to the dispatchers as well. Another idea is getting your dispatchers involved in recruitment. Make sure they're part of the process. This last time, some of our dispatchers were not able to participate because we had to do virtual interviews and we were a little bit short-staffed at this time. So we did the recruiting ourselves, my boss and I did. But if you get your people involved and you start talking to them and saying, here's the job application, it's online. Maybe they're allowed to share it on Facebook and everything else. If they're screaming from the rafters saying, come work at our agency, come work here. We have a great agency to work at. You're going to increase the number of applicants. You're going to raise awareness about what you do and everything else. So I think that those some of the things is be curious, ask how you can get involved. And then I want to make sure I leave everybody with a plan for implementing or dealing with change as well. And then we're going to talk about possibly becoming an ideal employee and do a few drawings here as we wrap up today's presentation, probably a little bit early. But I want to make sure I give you a few more tips and tricks. This one is an excellent point, and if you want to take a picture of it, go ahead. It's a how to implement change and also how to accept change and what your role can be. And this is also for everybody. It's not just one person that should do this. All right, the first step for planning ahead is to predetermine the change that's needed. Say you're going to upgrade your CAD system, upgrade your phone system, whatever it might be. Maybe there's a part of that that is the financial aspect of it. And maybe it takes longer, or it goes out for bid, or it goes out for proposal. Does your staff know everything that goes on in the predetermining the change that's needed step? A lot of times we just keep the staff or the dispatchers unaware of what's going on until the very end. And then all of a sudden we implement it and they don't know some of the hurdles and everything else that we've been through to make this happen. So that P is really important to keep your staff informed no matter where it's at in the change that is taking place. The L is to lay out your steps, involve each other, ask your dispatchers if it's a CAD upgrade, what's working? What do we like from our CAD system right now? What is it that we don't have that we would like to have that you've seen at other places? Maybe when we can travel again and there's not COVID restrictions everywhere, and you can send somebody to another agency to see a different CAD system or whatever it is. Know that training and bringing back ideas to your agency is always beneficial to have that interaction with other people. The third step is to adjust your priorities. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we are operating at peak or max efficiency right now in 911 centers, or we're saying we can't take on any more work, or we're the dumping ground. And what I mean by the dumping ground is we need to implement a new camera around the city or around the county, or we need to implement this or do that. And a lot of times, where does that work end up? It ends up in the dispatch center. And oftentimes we don't get people to do that work. We just are expected to add and add and add. And sometimes to have that discussion about your priorities and saying, what can we actually do and be successful at? And how are we going to, in order to implement a CAD system, what other priorities aren't going to get done? Because sometimes we can add so much to our staff that we're stressing them out to a level where their work performance is actually going to decrease instead of be where it needs to be. Then lastly, we're going to notify key personnel. And keep in mind, your key personnel is everybody that does the job and dispatches, but it's also everybody you dispatch for. So if you're making a change to your phone system and everything else, maybe you can have a few people, maybe you got some moms, dads, husbands, wives, kids, whatever it might be, that can test those phones in some fashion if you're able to set up a virtual environment. Maybe that's not possible though. But some way, somehow, notifying key personnel, that's the agencies you dispatch for, your dispatchers as well. The A in planning ahead is to allow for acceptance. And this one is a big one for me. I'm a high I person on that DISC assessment behavior. I'm a high influencer, positive, everything else. But the higher your S is, the less you like change. All right, the less you like change. And so you have to really allow that time for acceptance. And a lot of times, what I've also learned is that the dispatchers doing the change, they get, like I talked about earlier in the presentation, an email or screenshots, or they get to watch a webinar. And you've been working on this change for 6, 7 months, 8 months, and you've changed your mind 3 or 4 times. You've done it differently 3 or 4 times. You've got to think out loud and ask all these questions, but now we're live and boom, they're just expected to roll with the punches and everything else. So give them some time when implementing change to allow for acceptance. But this is a two-parter. Also understand, as a coworker, you have to give your other employees time for acceptance as well, and knowing that everybody's going to handle change just a little bit differently. So allow your coworker the opportunity to get better at the change as well and be a team player. And then you're going to head into action. Everything else, make sure you're doing it, and expect problems is a big one, and have a way to communicate those problems to everybody. One of the things I'm big on is doing a flyer. So during the derecho, that's why I started the video or the presentation with that. During the derecho, I did a flyer. I said, here's some phone numbers, here's some volunteer services that are set up, here's the policies that have, we've done. They got all of the emails in one spot every single day for the first about 7 to 10 days. I don't remember how many days I did it exactly. During the derecho, to make sure they could go to one spot each day and say, okay, here's the information and everything else. And expecting those problems, you have to expect problems anytime you take on change. And if you tell them that ahead of time, that we are expecting some problems, these are the problems that we're aware of and everything else, they will overcome it. Dispatchers are a truly reliable group. They're extremely dedicated to getting the job done, and they will overcome those hurdles as long as they know about them. The A in plan ahead, the last A, is to always point to the successes. Make sure you're pointing out that, hey, even during a rough CAD upgrade, for example, say you do a CAD upgrade and a lot of the process flows aren't working correctly, or a lot of the things that you used to be able to do, you can no longer do. But when you cut over to the new CAD system, maybe you stayed up the whole time. And if that is the understanding that, look, we're doing a major change here today, our number one goal is to make sure that we have CAD at cutover from the time we shut old one down to implementing new one. And we're going to document all those problems that we have, but our number one goal is to make sure we stay up, and keep that in front of them and point to the successes of the change. And then daily review your progress, walk around, talk to your employees. I personally don't do a good enough job at seeing my midnight shift. I know I say that, they know that, I say it to them as well. I need to do a better job at that, because they should also get to be able to ask those same questions and have the same feedback. And I'm not saying you need to see them every day, but review your progress somehow, whether you tell the afternoons and they tell midnights or whatever it might be, but make sure they have updates along the way. So if there's a problem that's there, let them know what you're doing to fix it, and make it daily until the issue is resolved. Even if you put it on a SharePoint type site where you got a linked file, that it's not taking up people's email, and they can go open it up, read it, and say, okay, what do I need to know today? All right, and that's a way of daily reviewing your progress. So I was also, one of the learning objectives from today was to find out what is required and if you're an ideal employee. And these are just some of the examples. You could take your agency and go down one by one and ask yourself, which ones do I do and which ones do I not do? All right. And maybe you have different examples for the agency you work at. But have you ever worked next to a coworker that's taking a domestic phone call and either A, doesn't ask about weapons, or B, doesn't ask if the suspect left on foot or in a car? Okay. And do you say anything to them? And I always challenge people on this slide, and I say, if our number one goal as dispatchers is responder safety, I think that's the number one goal for every dispatcher around the nation, is responder safety, whether it be law enforcement, fire, police, animal control, paramedics, airport police, whatever it is you dispatch for. If their safety is number one, and that's our overall number one goal, and somebody doesn't ask that question, and you work with more than one person, we'll say it's not a one seat PSAP, is it okay for you to turn and say, call them back, you didn't ask about weapons being involved? And if it's not, I would challenge everybody and say, that's where we need to go, is we need to start backing each other up, becoming ideal employees, setting the bar extremely high, doing everything we possibly can to protect the officers and the paramedics and the firefighters and everything else that we dispatch for. A second thing you could do is checking the premise history. Maybe your CAD system is automatically tied, or location of information, or past calls for service, whatever it is that you want to talk about. Or maybe you don't have that capability, and you could add that to a wish list moving forward, where you type in an address and it shows you all of the past calls for service at that location for a certain amount of time. The next one is the entering of warrants or protective orders. I've been all over, and sometimes the dispatchers that tell me they enter these things, they'll say, well, we do them on the midnight shift because that's the shift that's the slowest. And I've always asked back, I said, was the other shift, whether it's day shift or the middle shift, was there a time where they were just sitting there and maybe you were able to do it? And again, to me, this goes back to being an ideal employee and saying, you know what, I'm going to help the other shift out. It's a quieter day or a somewhat quiet day. If that exists at your agency, maybe just getting them entered on the midnight shift is all you can do to get them entered. And you're so busy that that happens from being a large center or a smaller center. I do absolutely understand. But answering phone calls is a huge one. If you hear the phone ring, and I briefly touched on this yesterday, and you look the other way to see what your coworkers are doing before you actually make the effort to push the button or pick up the receiver, however it is that you answer the phone, which one is ideal? It's probably a not ideal on both people's parts, because it actually causes an issue between the two coworkers. And then the communication stuff, which we talked about yesterday, turns on the radio, and we got this negative stuff going on. And then proper radio etiquette. Make sure you're doing it. Make sure you're enjoying the job. They do like a consistent, reliable, educated voice on the other end that's calm under pressure and everything else. So if you're able to do it, set the bar so high that everybody that you dispatch for wants you on the radio. Maybe you're at your point in your career where you've taken one of those phone calls, or you've walked past a responder in the parking lot and they say, man, it would have been nice to have you on the main channel tonight, main dispatch channel. If you've ever received that feedback, that is a tremendous compliment to you, and you're doing everything that you should be doing. And if you hear it often, hopefully it's just about you being amazing and everything else, because that is huge. You're setting the bar so high. And I realize that sometimes you stop and you say, our morale's so low, what can I do to make it better? All right, and everything else. And it just little by little, step by step, you do things to become an ideal employee. People will start observing. You'll become a leader of your department, whether it's by position or profession, or by just being a frontline employee that leads by example. You can be a leader of your department at any given time. I think if you really analyze and look at yourself and create this spreadsheet on your own and ask, am I an ideal employee? Or am I only doing what's required? Or am I only doing the bare minimum just because I'm a little burnt out or whatever it might be? Because if you are burnt out and everything else and you're stressed out, you're going to have that one call that makes it to the public, or it's played on the news where we don't ask a question or we treat somebody poorly. And I always tell people, don't let one call define your career. Do a great job on every call so you never have to risk that one call that gets to you. And that is a tough job to do in 911. And how does it start? It starts by becoming that ideal employee that all of us need to work on being. The main thing that's going to determine your success is attitude. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because everybody's heard about attitude. I do got a little short story here I'll share where I went into a meeting, and I'm one of the most energetic, positive people you'll ever meet. And the deputy chief told me to quit, kind of stop. He talked to me offline. I didn't listen, and I should have. And then he really told me to stop. And I found out he was the deputy chief. He said, "I'll meet with you later." It was Monday. He ended up meeting with me on Friday, calling me on the phone and calling me down to his office. And he deserved to, because I was not myself. My attitude was bad that day. And I've never let it get back to me to that point. And I went out and I went to his car one day. He was getting ready to leave for the lot. And I went out and I told him, I said, "I apologize." I said, "Thanks for, not hammering me too hard. I learned from my mistake and everything else," because he said, "Normally my attitude is where it needs to be. And I'm a really positive person." We train on attitude all the time, but we never tell people what they can do to notice a great attitude. If you see these things going on in your coworkers, the willingness to see the best in others, see opportunity everywhere, not failures, or where the department is struggling or whatever, if they see where they can help the department, or if they focus on solutions, if they bring you a problem, or they also bring in a solution or two, and taking responsibility, extreme ownership of everything. As a leader, if you're a leader or a lead dispatcher or a supervisor, manager, director, all responsibility and everything else, taking extreme ownership of your department. Not saying if I had better employees, we could do it, or if you're an employee saying if my coworkers would do this or do that. Extreme ownership and a positive attitude is going to get you to where you need to go. So start taking responsibility, and I challenge you to do those calls, make those radio transmissions absolutely perfect, and start focusing on the things at your level that you can control, because people really will feel that attitude. And if you want to reach your maximum potential, it's the commitment to continual improvement. And what I mean by that is reading, learning, talking to people, attending these conferences, staying with us all the way till the end, everything else. The main thing is the commitment to continual improvement. Concentrate on a goal, try to meet it. And here's a big one: forget the past and focus on the future. I know we don't want to just always just completely erase our memories of the past. And what I mean by that is if something happened 3 and 4 years ago and it's still bringing you down, and you're still negative at work and still bringing it up and still bringing it up, and everybody you work with has heard it, there's no way we can go back and change that. So we need to try and make it better so we don't repeat it again. And I challenge everybody that's listening to commit yourself to continual improvement. And being here today is a big part of that. If you're a leader or you're a frontline employee, doesn't matter. Here's a slide that tells you exactly what leaders do. And the number one thing you can do is to genuinely care about your people. Number one and first and foremost is genuinely care about your coworkers if you're frontline, or your people if you're a manager or a leader. Encourage them, challenge them, set them up for future success, because they are the people that are doing the job each and every day, that take it home with them if they have to. Hopefully there's mechanisms in place where they don't have to. But your people, and building that relationship and building that trust. Your people are what make your agency go. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that. Your people are number one thing. So what is gold line success? All right, I tried to go through this a little bit quickly. Gold line success is truly a journey, but the journey is more fun if you know where you're going. All right, if you're kind of just lost and everything else, and be curious about what's coming next with 911, what's coming next with your agency. If you're able to, ask questions and then get some answers up front. Actively listen to the responses though, and ask some effective questions and everything else. You need to find ways to grow personally and professionally. Becoming more self-aware, become aware of your communication style and your behavior. I can help you do that if you're interested. And also you need to be willing to help others. Be present when you walk into work. If you're checked out your whole shift, whether it's 8 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours, 12, 16, if you're kind of checked out and just going through the motions, that makes it more stressful on everybody. Even if it's a single PSAP department, if you're checked out, your responders, when you're dispatching over the radio, may notice as well. But gold line success, if you start taking these keys, you start becoming an ideal employee. It'll make all the difference in the world, because the job that you do, is extremely important. And the job that you do makes a difference each and every single call. And here's a little video of somebody that was impacted by 911 in a positive way. I always like to accent the positive. So we'll play this and see how it goes.
I just started getting pains in my chest, and I thought something wasn't right, and it just got worse and worse and worse. I told my wife to call for an ambulance because I thought I was having a heart attack, and that's the last I can remember till EMS guys got here.
He was gray, he was clutching his chest, telling me his arms hurt, and he had sweat dripping off of him. And he clearly was in distress. And he went over and sat down in his chair, and I called. Our neighbor arrived because it came over on his pager that there was a 911 call, and he, of course, knew the address.
I first walked in, I checked to see if he was responsive, checked for a pulse. At that point, he was very gray, had fixed pupils, and I knew we needed to act quick.
His response time was within probably the first 2 to 3 minutes that the call was dispatched to our rescue. 2 other guys, one of our junior firefighters and another rescue came. The fact that they came that quickly, they're the ones that had to do CPR on him. They're the ones that had to move him and get him down to take care of him.
Upon our arrival, we were met by some of the firemen outside that said that they had done CPR. He did not look like the Dan I knew from being around the fire department for many years. Immediately, we got him up off the ground, put him on our cot, which was right in there, hooked him up to our 12-lead monitor, and was able to see on our monitor that he was having evidence of a STEMI or an ST, elevated myocardial infarction. We got a hold of Mercy Air Care out of Sioux City and decided to tier with them along the way to the cath lab instead of coming the 10 miles back to Storm Lake to the local facility.
When I got there, they went right to work and put a stent in my wrist and opened it up, and I could feel the difference right away. I felt great after that. I hadn't felt this good in years.
Had I tried to take Dan over to the hospital on my own, he would have died on the way there. It all happened that quick.
Being able to call 911 and give us some symptoms and some presentation of the patient gives us an idea as responders what we're going to find on scene. It brings all of the resources right to their living room.
The sooner you can get aid, the better off the outcome's going to be. I'm a perfect example. The sooner I got it, the better off it was going to be. 911 call saved my life.
All right, so that was a little video about calling 911 and how you guys make an impact and everything else that saves somebody's life. My success journey to put it all together is a lot of times I am curious. I'm trying to do things, getting involved, things that I talk about. I was the Iowa APCO president at one point. I enjoy the journey. I continue to get involved, meeting all of you guys, seeing the comments earlier. I can't wait to go back and read them. One small thing can change the culture of your comm center. You just got to be consistent at doing it. And every call you take, you can make an impact on somebody's life, like the video that we just watched. And if you listen real closely to all the words, and hopefully you could hear them, the paramedic said, you know, I knew him and everything else. And sometimes we're working agencies and jurisdictions where we do know the people that we're responding to. And make sure you check on your dispatchers and everything else when they go through one of those calls, because that can add to the trauma and that can add to everything else. Because the question is, what if it were family? And if we treat every caller like we know them and everything else, and we have that personal interaction with them, and we want to be the difference and make their life a little bit better from calling 911 instead of a little bit worse, you'll truly start changing the culture of your comm center and moving towards goal line success. So that's the presentation, but don't hang up just yet or whatever, because I reached out to Matt and they're going to do a couple drawings. I'm going to give away 2 books, and with the books is going to be an emailed license to get the 30-page report to find out a little bit about your personality style so you can share it with maybe a few of your coworkers. We're also doing a question and answer session tomorrow. So we'll be back. I'll have one person that works with me that's a law enforcement person, and the second person that actually helped me do that, ironically, just quit the police department a week ago, but he'll be here, but he's not officially an officer as of today. He just quit last week. But I'll have those two here. One's also a volunteer firefighter and a paramedic as well. And that question and answer session will be awesome. Thanks to everybody that participated, put up the comments. I hope you really enjoyed this topic. I know it's a little bit heavy, but thank you to everybody for registering. And thank you to Tina for having me.
Thank you, Joe. I have a question here that was sent by a private message. It says, staffing is a serious problem at our center. Is there a matrix suggesting the number of staff per shift or per county population? We need to justify the need to the funders.
Yeah, the one that I would recommend, and the one that I'm the most familiar with, is APCO Project Retains. You use your numbers, you plug them in. It's your calls for service numbers, the number of employees you have. You get to kind of plug in if it's full coverage or if you can do part-time coverage and everything else. It's fairly cheap. You get to access it through online, and it's part of APCO, or APCO at least. And that's the one that I'm the most familiar with that I think directly relates to dispatch centers.
Okay, and this has been multiple questions or requests. Is there any way that you could share your presentation from today with us so we could send it out to the attendees?
Absolutely. Would you like it by like a handout style, or would you like it by the PDF, like PDF handout, or would you like it by PowerPoint? What works best for you guys to share it with other people? Would it be a PDF?
PDF.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely, whoever I can email, or you guys just email me, Joe at 911 Gold9 Training, or if it's Maureen, I can send the email to her with the PDF so that you guys have the slides as well that was covered today during the presentation.
Yes.
That would work great if you can send it. We intend on putting all of the sessions up on that have been recorded, so we can add that to it.
Awesome. Any other questions come in while I was, and thanks for reading those back to me. That really helps not having to read those while you're trying to talk. So thank you to the Tina admin people for all the excellent help. This has been amazing.
Yeah, the PowerPoint is, everybody's giving PowerPoint an exclamation point. So I think PowerPoint PDF would be great.
Okay, awesome.
All right, are you ready for your book drawing?
Yeah. And whoever gets this, I'll just give my email. So whoever gets this, just email Joe at 911goldlinetraining.com, Joe at 911goldlinetraining.com. And I'll just need an address, either your agency address, if you can accept things at your agency, or your home address, whichever is easier for you. You'll get a book in the mail from me. The first one we'll do is, or one of them that we'll do, is the ideal team player. I talked about being an ideal employee, so this will help you. And the other one, I gave a lot of leadership techniques to motivating. It's leadership gold. So one person will win this one person will win this one, and both will receive an email to take the DISC personality behavior analysis as well.
Okay, and Maureen has just posted your email in the chat so everybody can have that. And the first book goes to Connie Brock.
Connie Brock, awesome. And go ahead and shoot me an email, Connie, and I'll get you that in the mail.
Okay, and the second book will go to Leslie Music.
Congratulations, Leslie, as well. And thanks to everybody that stayed on the last session. I greatly appreciate it. And I appreciate everything that you guys do.
Thank you, Joe. Greatly appreciate you being part.
Yep, thank you.
All right, guys, we have one more gift card to give away. And again, these are e-gift cards. Please check your emails for those this evening. And if it's not in your email, check your junk mail, and it will come from Rose Watt. And the winner of this gift card is Michael Spencer. So congratulations to all of you for that's won gift cards or the drawings today. We want to say thank you for joining us for our second day of the TINA Virtual Conference. We will begin again in the morning at 9:30 Central Time, 10:30 Eastern, and we will start with professional development, and Tracy Eldridge will be joining us again at that time. So we hope you all have a good evening, enjoy, and we hope to see you back in the morning.